Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Southeast Whitetail. Cory and I are pleased to have on the line and just tickled pink to have Cuz Strickland on the line today to talk to us a little bit about southeastern hunting. Mr. Strickland, or as you have told me to call you Cuz. So pardon me if I slip up during this. That's just my upbringing. But Cuz, thank you for joining Cory and I this morning on the
Hey,
podcast.
it's always good to be relevant. And I told you on your text, I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, Mr. Strickland was my dad, and the cuz handle has served me well. You know, it kind of puts people at ease. Smarter people look at you and say, "Oh, that's one of them good old boys."
Right.
And so you listen a lot in business situations, and so I've kind of enjoyed the cuz moniker, if you get what I know.
I understand that. Well, how was your July 4th? Did you spend some time with some family?
Oh yeah, we did ours on July the 3rd because the weather forecast was
Oh, yeah.
for rain, and I still got grandsons. Although they're getting grown, the fireworks were a big deal. So hey, I said let's just do it July the 3rd because we still cherish going to the fireworks stand and spending too much money shooting fireworks off in the dark. And yeah, we had a big cooking. I had my smoker and my griddle going all morning, getting all that food. But I was blessed to have my daughters and their family and all the grandkids. We were missing just one, but it was a special day. Ate too much, and
That's
they
right.
all understand about Independence Day, and I made a little post that don't ever forget the spirit that made this possible. And so yeah, special day. I enjoy those days off, especially when we're out at the farm together. And my corn tassel during the 4th of July, that's got to be a good sign.
Yeah, it is. What about you, Cory? How was your
Yeah, we,
how was your
we just got
holiday?
back from North Georgia. Yeah, my parents live up there, and we went up, I guess, Saturday morning, and we came back yesterday. And 4th of July was pretty uneventful for us. We just cut grass. We had a great time up there in North Georgia. Talking about corn, we drove across the state. I live in South Georgia, and we had to drive to the very, very northeast portion of it. There's a bunch of corn coming up. It looks, all the rain we've gotten looks pretty good this year. But yeah, we had a good weekend. Had our neighbors were shooting off fireworks, so we kind of got a little, cheap show there. And yeah, it's good weekend. How about you?
I was at the farm for a couple of days doing some work on some food plots and trying to get some things ready, and then came down to my dad, still here now in Bluffton, and had a good time with some family. Watched some fireworks last night, and saw some of the whitetail around here in Bluffton, the more domesticated deer that are just kind of hanging around the neighborhood. That's always
Yeah.
fun. But interestingly, they've got a pretty good healthy population of fox squirrels down here, which we're coastal here in Bluffton, and it's pretty neat. It's like a little isolated area. They've got a pretty good population of them, so
That's pretty cool.
that's always good. But I'm ready to get back to the office and get back working and kind of get back in that in that mode, because pretty soon the kids are going back to school. So
Yeah, I got to spend a couple days here, and then I got to be down at the farm trying to get it all. But with all these storms we've had, I've just been. I know I drive by it and look at it, and I'll deal with that tomorrow. I'll deal with that next weekend. I got trees down everywhere, so it's gonna be fun.
I look in this food plots, and I don't know if you deal with this, cuz you probably. I know everyone deals with deer pressure on food plots, and in different areas, obviously. But I've got a unique setup where we've got one tract of land, and the farmers have gone heavy on cotton this year. And in our area, they plant peanuts, traditionally peanuts, corn, and cotton. Very little soybeans. If they do soybeans, it's a big field. It's going to be irrigated. And it's just a big field for us in our area would probably be 20, 30 acres. So most of these fields are maybe, 5 to 10 acres. And where they've highly concentrated on planting cotton, the deer still eat it, but they just put so much more pressure on our food plots as to where the areas where they've gone hard in, or it should be heavy in corn and peanuts. The peanuts they're already eating, but the corn they're about to start hitting pretty soon. So I've got some food plots where I can't keep the deer out, doing all kinds of tactics, and some are doing pretty good. How do you plant warm season food plots?
I planted a bunch of iron clay peas this year. I usually don't have that many issues with early season food plot pressure because I actually let the farmer who's around me, he plants 30 acres of my stuff on my field, and I told him, I said, corn or soybeans. Because I've seen them
Yeah.
plant cotton before. We don't have many peanut guys down here, but I usually don't have a big issue. I've planted soybeans myself in the past when they planted corn, because the corn's not ready for the deer to even nip on till late July, August,
Right.
whenever. And I've never had any success getting soybeans up past about 4 inches, 5 inches. The deer just annihilate it. It's unbelievable. But I'm pretty blessed. They do a lot of soybeans. About every third year they'll plant corn and they'll do soybeans like 3 years in a row. So I'm blessed with that. I got soybeans on my 30 acres next to his this year. He planted, and I don't charge him. Say, hey, go farm this 30 acres. It saves me from having to mow it. But food plot pressure can be a big deal. I can remember early on when I bought my farm, I couldn't get any deer in there for any reason. There's never been any food there. So I welcome that. Like I said, this year I planted a bunch of iron clay peas, and the deer hadn't been in them, which is pretty unbelievable with us because I'm surrounded on 3 sides by ag and most of that soybeans, which is good. I feel like they'll eat the peas before the first frost because they'll be dead by then.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I've enjoyed getting iron clay peas up, but the pressure, I welcome it. I hadn't had that issue lately, but I'm blessed to have soybeans around me a lot.
It's kind of funny to say it out loud sometimes because you're planting it. If you're planting a spring, a warm season annual, you're planting it for the nutrition. Generally speaking, if you're going to plant it, May, sometime in May, you want it on the, in the ground for as long as possible before the first frost kills it. So you're planting for the nutrition, but you got to keep the deer out for so long before so the plant could be established and, browse tolerance. So you're trying to keep them out before they can come in and feed on them, as opposed to a traditional fall, kill plot where you're just kind of planting it and maybe early fall. So let's get right to this, cause when does your season, can you kind of walk us through your season as far as when it opens and kind of when you start prepping? Because a lot of us, I'm looking forward to this podcast for a number of reasons, but one particular reason is that you're in a different part of the Southeast that I'm not familiar with and Cory's not familiar with. And we haven't had many people on to talk about your area. Can you kind of walk us through your, deer season and what you're doing now to prep for it?
Yeah. The archery season opens October the 1st. Usually, it's I can remember a time or two they did the first Saturday in October, and it's usually between, I don't know, it can be 95 degrees
right.
Opening weekend here, but it's still a big deal. When the grandsons were, I went, I don't know, decades without missing the opening day. It was just a thing with me, and I'm sure I missed a couple, even if it's hot. And, I'm sure it's hot where you guys are too. It's really hot in Mississippi. I saw a thing. We're the 5th hottest state in the United States, and it can be a little challenging. But the cool part about it is, and I heard Toxie talking about this on one of those Game People podcasts. He said your best times to get a big deer in our part of the world, opening week or the last week. And he
Yeah.
explained why. And I certainly believe that, especially if you got some soybeans around. The soybeans here depends on who plants them. We got some Mennonites around here that are just the best farmers ever. And they usually got their stuff cut and gone, by October the 1st. But there's some guys that get it planted in late. And the soybean, this is just me. I'm not a biologist and I don't do any kind of research, but I can tell you they go through a couple of stages. They just hammer those soybeans when they're young, and tender and all that. And they'll stay out in them. But once they turn yellow, the deer around here don't fool with them anymore, unless they stay there until they're brown and, they're eating the beans actually. So it's every October is a little different. I try to have my food plots, a couple of them. I try to have 2 or 3 food plots ready for the opening weekend because I know all the grandsons are going to be here. 2 of them have moved into compound bows. Cranky, my youngest one, he's still shooting a little crossbow, which is fine. But I can't roll the dice on planting everything in late August or the first week of September because of the army worms. I don't know if you guys have ever had to deal with army worms, but a year before last, we had them so bad. And it's like it happens really quick. Like this is 2 years ago. I had corn planted. I have it in 2 spots. It's about 10 acres total. And one's behind what we call our man den, our little hunting metal building. That's where we stay, the shop. And then the other's down in the bottom. Most of it's down in the bottom, probably a 6-acre stand, 7. And I was watching the corn behind the man den that year, and it looked good. And I rode down. I mean, it's made. It's in a good stage. And I rode down to the down in the bottom, and it literally looked like I was growing cane poles. And I was like, "What?" I thought somebody had sprayed it by mistake or something.
Yeah.
And went down there, and it was army worms. And I've never seen anything like that. First off, I didn't know there were 4 or 5 different kinds. I didn't know they would climb. They absolutely devastated 5, 6, 7 acres of corn. It was literally, and I had just been down there a week or 2 before. So I have to kind of be careful. I would like to get all my food plots ready, for October 1st, but I can't do that. You kind of got to hang out at the co-op, watch social media, call your buddies. Hey, you seen any army worms? It's easy for me to know if we got them because I live out in the middle of nowhere. And you can literally see them sometime on the sidewalk. It wasn't too bad last year. That's another reason I didn't plant corn last year. I was devastated. Plus the fertilizer was so high. But anyway, I try to have 2 or 3 ready because nowadays when you're taking young kids, you don't always have. I can't put Cranky in a lock on yet. Now the other boys are good in ladder stands and stuff and funnels and pinches, and that's fine. But those aren't always the best spots early. So I want to have 2 or 3 food plots ready if I can for that opening weekend. But I start looking at it and kind of making my mind up about the middle toward the end of August. Dove season opens up here September the 1st. A lot of times I want to be, doing my food plots that weekend if I can.
Do you mix in your so when you're looking at first I should say that very much mimics Georgia and South Carolina for the most part, the traditional October. Alabama is the state that just it's like it's one of the states that's just not like all the others in the Southeast. I guess you could throw Florida in there too as far as the deer season and what they're dealing with. But that's so when you're planning out food plots and stands and you're talking about the opener, is a lot of this focusing on just your general habitat and your huntability, or is that focusing on your grandkids and what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, when I bought this farm, it was, I'd say 80% open. So I immediately got a plan together. I'm planting pine trees because they'll grow fast here.
Yep.
But I kind of had that canvas to look at. Well, here's a fence line that's got some oak trees on it. So I was able to kind of map out where I was going to leave an opening for a food plot, depending on when. You know, I guess the most common constant wind down here southeast, but the best hunting's always on that north wind after the front goes through. So I was like,
Right.
I want as many spots as I can get like that. And that has changed. So when I first started laying them out, it was all about huntability. I wasn't thinking about those little kids coming up. You know, none of them were born when I bought the farm. Maybe my oldest granddaughter was. Yeah, my oldest granddaughter, she is now a sophomore at Mississippi State. That's how old I am. But yeah, I was so fascinated with that because I'd always hunted like public land, been in a hunting club. I never had the opportunity to kind of lay out my own little hunting spot. So that was fascinating to me. And I still got them in the same spots. I tried to keep most of it on the kind of toward the middle of my farm, you know, because I got hunting camps on two sides, and that can be interesting. Always has been for me. But it's so much to think about. But I'm at the stage now where I've worked the ground so much that it's pretty easy. You know, it's all about Mother Nature. If you get some rain, you got a food plot. And if it doesn't rain, you're in trouble.
That you know, those last couple of sentences, I'm trying to figure out what I want to say, but those last couple of sentences do kind of hit home for me, because it was Cory just picked up a very nice tract of land that I'm sure he's going to talk about at some point. I think this is his second year with it, but our farm, just like what you said, there's some certain things, like when it comes to burning prescribed fire or like food plots. I'm not saying I'm the best, but I kind of know like my windows from working the land for so long about when, if I do this window or this window, and a lot of times those windows change because of weather. And like our soybeans, like planting them, we were too wet. It was one of those years where we were too wet for so long, because a lot of our land is, a lot of our food plots are in a giant Carolina Bay, which is a low depression area. It holds a lot of water. And we were too wet for so long throughout May. And then when it stops raining, it just dries up and gets really hard. So it's fluctuations. Cory, you're probably hearing a lot of this and thinking about yourself and your property. I mean, because Cory's got one heck of a blank canvas.
Yeah. I mean, really, once we get in there, once it stops raining and dries up a little bit, we'll be able to get in there. And as we've talked about on previous podcasts, you know, offline, you know, talking about the timber projects we got going on. And I think we'll have my forester on here at some point in the future, and we'll talk about that. But that really where it's going to open it up. That's where we're going to get in there and kind of take some of those thick blocks. What I've got is kind of the inverse of what you've got, because I'm kind of right in the middle of town. You know, my property is, you know, I've got commercial stuff on all sides of me. So I've kind of got like a little island of habitat. You know, it's pretty sizable. It's, you know, about 375 acres ish. But it presents a different kind of challenge. So we're trying to, the same thing, that we're trying to hold as many animals, try to create as much carrying capacity as we can, because my kids are, my daughter's 6, my son's 4, and I bought the place, you know, for one, just to have a place for the family, but for two, to raise my kids kind of how I've always, you know, been raised out in the woods and outside, and having the opportunity to do that on my own piece of ground. And when we were talking to the forester, it really wasn't about maximizing the dollars, about cleaning it up and making it more huntable and the accessibility of that. So once we kind of get some of the woods thinned out, we've got a pretty good field system, pretty good food plot system already in place. Roads are pretty good, but really thinning out some of those wax myrtles and sweet gums that we have, and going back and creating some pine bedding, and you know, that it's going to be a long-term project. But like you said, you know, it just seems like yesterday my daughter was born, and she's about to turn 7, and you know, I know before I know it, it'll be, you know, it'll be developed to the point where we're hunting it with teenagers, not just, you know, toddlers.
Yeah. It's the blink of an eye. And
Yeah.
you know, when I was setting my stuff up, this was 20 something years ago, and I was still pretty hardcore, all lock-ons, you know, that kind of stuff. And as the kids grew, the grandkids, it was like, man, I just embraced pop-up stands, shooting houses, all that kind of stuff. Some people, you know, I understand what it's to be. I understand what it's like to be a hardcore bow hunter. That's what I mean. That's all I did. I used to carry a lock-on spear and 10 screw-in steps and hunted the Hohenschildern National Forest just because I wanted to. And now everybody talks about public land like it's something special. That's just all I ever had. I get that. But once you have those kids hunting and you want them to have some success and see deer, then you set stuff up different. It's like, it's way more important about getting them in there. What's the entry going to be like? Because they may not be quiet, you know, and what's the perfect wind and all that kind of stuff. So it's fun. You got to make a hard effort to do that. And you got to make a hard effort to make sure they have fun and can see deer. So that's why I said my habitat mindset is maximum carrying capacity.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I've sat there and not seen, there wasn't anything, there wasn't such thing as a food plot back when I hunted early when I was a kid. You just hunted an acorn tree, a persimmon tree, a pinch point, a creek crossing, and I love that, but they're not necessarily wired like that. Their life moves a lot. Their life moves too fast, and I want them to see deer. And I've kind of gotten over that hump now. The boys are 16, 14, and 11, and they're really good hunters, and they can kind of pick their own spots now. So now I'm hoping I live long enough to have great grandchildren so I can go through that again. But it was fun to set up stuff to make them successful. You know, you want them to have success because not many of their buddies hunt, and you want them to wear that kind of like a little badge. You know, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and so that was my whole deal for the habitat was maximum carrying capacity, and it wasn't necessarily about getting a buck to 6 years old. And I'm sure they've shot some that would have been good deer, but somebody would ask me like, well, what'd that deer score? Well, it scored a perfect 10. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only score. That's the only score I was worried about. Now, again, don't get me wrong. If a big one shows up, a lot of times they do because my place stays kind of quiet, if you know what I mean. Everybody gets excited. We have to like, well, who's going to hunt that area? Because you know, Cranky killed a big deer last year, but that part of it's fun, and that's a natural progression. They're going to get to that point because they have YouTube and Instagram or whatever they're looking at. They're going to want to get a big deer or a big bass. But
that's one thing right there that, you know, we talk about time, kind of how it's moved on. I mean, I remember being a kid watching, you know, you only got hunting shows on TNN and ESPN on like Saturday morning, you know, or whatever day it was. And it was just completely different. Now, you know, you got 50 channels outdoors if you want to go find them. You got YouTube, just a whole world out there. And then, you know, the products are different. I mean, when I was a kid, you had to want it. You know, I didn't have as many video games and stuff to choose from now. And certainly didn't have a phone to play on, but the products were different. Like I remember vividly standing with my dad, and it was in no way made for two people. You know, we were up there and, you know, hunting over a little clear cut or going up to North Georgia and kind of hunting on the side of the mountain. Now, I mean, you know, there's just so many more products available, you know, whether it be enclosed blinds or, I'm not saying they didn't have them back then, but certainly not to the level they have now to make it feasible. I mean, I've got one enclosed blind on my property that, I mean, you get in that thing and seal it off, and I mean, you could have a dance party up there. There's no, you know, you don't have a whole lot of fear of getting busted, but you know, it's good for the kids, but it kind of spoils them at the same time. You know, I mean, you talk about hunting that public land back in the day, carrying some climbing sticks and going in there with a lock on. That's something like, you know, kids have to go put themselves in that situation now, you know, when they get to be a teenager compared to when I hunted. That was just, we took a climber and just went. You know, now they kind of get brought up, you know, with with, Mark, I know your place is set up really well for kids. It's just something they're going to have to go out and kind of do on their own. Unlike for us, it was necessity. Out of them, it's just got to be they want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that they'll, if a kid progresses to that next level of a hunter, they'll get there. If they get the itch and then they get self-sufficient and can start hunting on their own, they shouldn't move to that. But because what you were saying a minute ago about your property, we went through some changes probably starting maybe 8 years ago. In the past 5 years, we've been going through a lot more to where we were getting better and better about hunting our property. And we were getting better as being land stewards. And then every time you start working the habitat better, you start increasing the population. You need to shoot more deer, you need to kill more deer, and you need to hunt better. But after hunting a property for so long, we were hunting it better. So translation, a lot of our deer stands were becoming really at advanced level. And I don't know how to put that, but maybe it's not just looking at a fire break. You're looking down maybe a crossing and you don't have that long, but the shot could be 50 yards, but it could be 200 yards, something like that. And what I was learning from bringing it, because we've always brought a lot of guests, a lot of friends and family to hunt. Sometimes they've hunted before, sometimes they're novices, and that's great. But we were learning that you just can't put someone that's not very experienced into an experienced hunter stand. And it might just be a situation where they don't understand it, but we were understanding it, because sometimes, you might be in an area where it's hard to judge bucks, but if you're in a food plot, it could be a little bit easier to judge bucks. If they come out, they feed, that type of thing. But what we've been going through the past 5 years is really lowering our stands, a lot more ground blinds. We've been building ground blinds out of like 2x4s and just wrapping it. And in fact, this year we're going to be building some bow blinds to where, you could sit down with a compound bow in a ground blind and pull back, made out of 2x4s and wraps. But all that's been great for the kids, and it's been great for the disability hunts we do. And my father, he's about to be 72 this year, so he's getting older, and a lot of his peers and contemporaries, they don't want to climb heights. And that's something I noticed, Cory. I don't know if you noticed that, but I had some friends like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I would take them hunting, and they just didn't want to get elevated. They deer hunted, and I did notice it with some people. They didn't want to say it, but they just did not want to climb, because some of these stands, the ladders are straight up, they're not angled, and they're not steps. So I think y'all are right. It's just making things. But I actually wrote a piece, very, very short, on Father's Day, cuz about taking kids hunting, but then going that extra step, like what you said. Finding a food plot where they can see deer, putting them in front of deer, putting them in a situation where they're in a ground blind or pop up, a reg net blind or something, to where they can realistically see the animal and then possibly be around you. Because right now my kids are about to be 4 and 7. So they've only gone with me while I've hunted. Obviously, they're not pulling the trigger. So I'm trying to get them in situations where they can see me kill and try to advance to that next step. So that being said, what are some of your thoughts as far as you've got the food plot, you've got the stand, cuz to take a kid hunting? How do you bridge to that next level where they're a young kid tagging along with you, they're seeing you shoot and kill, and to where you're progressing into getting a gun in their hand to shoot?
Yeah, a lot goes on there. First off, I had all girls, and I didn't necessarily want them to be these big, awesome hunters. I mean, you turn on some of the hunting channels now, and that's all it is.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I'm fine with that. I wanted to know a couple of things. I wanted them to know the lingo around the supper table, and I wanted them to know where food comes from. Those are big deals. Some people don't realize that. And I tell, I'm on the board of the NDA, and we talk about all the time how to spread the message. Absolutely. And I always say, use the food card. People want to know where they're fed. So that's cool. Here's the thing, and I have taken my kids, my grandkids, and I couldn't begin to tell you how many countless people I've introduced, whether it's through an organization. Lawrence tell me the other day, we're going to do a podcast just about the first. And some things are always hold true. Number one is you want them to be comfortable and have a good time. To me, that meant starting them with a BB gun or a 22 and clinking. Do everything. If you're going to if they're going to start their hunt with a 223 and you got it in a vise, we'll put the little 22 short in a vise. And because they want knowledge. Knowledge is power. They want to know everything that's going on because this is way outside of their comfort zone. So, I would begin by taking them, hey, here's where we're going to go. There's your blind. We'll be in there next Saturday. Here's the little vise. Here's the 22. Clink, talk about it. Look at stuff along the way. You got to decide if you're going to be a guide or a teacher. You got to leave your ego at the door because your ego is going to run the hunt if you're not careful. No, we're not going to shoot that 4-point. We're waiting on, hey, it ain't your hunt. It's theirs. Got to feel them out. Let them do what they want to do. And the more they enjoy it, the more they're apt to go again. That second and third hunt, to me, is way more important than the first one because it's like, I did my job. I got them where hey, Pop, let's go hunt. That's kind of cool. If they're going to sit there, it's a new world. If Cranky's go with me and they all killed a deer when they were 5, those 3 boys, those grandsons.
Nice.
With a crossbow. And if they wanted to sit in there from 3 o'clock to 4:30 on their phone, I was fine with that. I'm not, just because I didn't do that when I was little. It's a different world. You gotta get into their mindset. At 4:30, it's like, Cranky, put your phone down. Let's start looking. They put it down. But and if we're talking for between that first hour and a half, he'll answer. But I'm not going to say put your phone down and watch for deer. Kind of got to let them do something different. It's a different day. When my oldest granddaughter was 12, she's in Mississippi State now. We were catfishing. And we had the best time. And she's a frilly little thing. They're all dancing and, doing ballet and that stuff. But we went catfishing. I showed her how to skin them, fillet them and all that. And we're eating supper that night, had a little fish fry. And she said, hey, Pop. I said, what? She said, we caught those fish. We cleaned the fish. Yeah, I cooked the fish with you. Now we're eating them. That's pretty cool. Well, see, that was a defining moment for her because she kind of put the whole circle together. One time, the reason I brought that fishing trip up, she had her phone. She was swiping. I said, hey, you spend too much time on that phone. She says, Pop, if you're not on Instagram, you're not relevant. Now, she wasn't snapping at me. She was just telling me what's going on. And I came home and I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to be relevant to my grandkids. And I dove into social media. Not many old guys do that, but I got Instagram, Facebook, we have a YouTube channel, all that stuff. And they can keep up with me and I can keep up with them. There is a good side to that. There's a bad side, just like anything else in this country. But they're able to, I don't say they think I'm cool, but they know at least I'm relevant in their world. And you gotta get out of the mindset. And I was guilty of it as anybody. And I've seen it so much turkey hunting. Well, we gotta kill a turkey. We gotta kill a turkey. No, you ain't gotta kill a turkey. You're missing that whole, man, come look at the spider web over here. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Did you hear that? Whippoorwill, the redbird's the first one that cranks up in the morning in the Southeast. All those things build confidence in them, and all of a sudden they're that's their comfort space. They're staying in their lane, and you made it their lane. So it's a way different mindset when the kids get involved than it is when you're hunting that 150 class deer that you got 900 pictures of. And it's a commitment. It's just like filming a hunt. I used to tell people all the time, if you want to be a good videographer or producer, you got to love it enough to leave it because you're quitting. Because you ain't killing stuff no more. You're filming other people doing it, and that's got to be your focus. You got to love it enough to leave it alone.
I couldn't do
It's,
that.
well, I didn't have a choice. That's what we did. You mentioned it. Cory mentioned TNN a while ago. I'll tell you a funny story. When we first started airing on TNN, which was a big audience, let me tell you, those numbers were impressive. We aired the highest rated show we ever aired. We were there for a while. We went from Saturday mornings to Sunday nights, and those were huge numbers. The highest rated show we ever aired was a little kid. He was Brett DiBiase. His dad was Ted DiBiase from the WWF, the $1 Million Man.
That's right.
But this little kid, he got buck fever. We're sitting in a shooting house at Bent Creek Lodge in Alabama, and he got buck fever so bad it was the funniest thing. I had the giant camera, and I would film the little deers like this, and I'd film him, and he was breathing so hard he was fogging his scope up. So I would take my sleeve, and it was a hilarious thing. He ended up missing the deer, but it was the highest rated show we ever aired. And I was like, that's kind of odd. So I ran that show again the next season and just put it in with the lineup. Didn't say a recap from 1997, whatever. Again, highest rated show we aired. That proved two things to me. Number one, content matters. And it doesn't matter if it's a giant deer or an African safari and all that. The content that we were putting out there, most people could relate to. I found out real quick, if you got too far away from the deer woods with a firearm, your ratings drop. But the coolest thing happened from that, this was way before social media. I got a letter from this guy, and I ain't gonna say which. I think he was up north somewhere, probably Pennsylvania or something. He lit me up. He sent a personal letter to me about, you had that kid sitting in a shooting house over a planted green field. You ain't teaching him nothing. It was just a most terrible letter ever. How sorry I was for letting that kid be spoiled and all that. So and the guy put his name in there, and I had him tracked down, and I called him. I ain't gonna say his name. And I said, let me tell you something. This is Cuz Strickland. Really? I said, yeah. I said, first off, that little kid had been deer hunting about 10 times and hadn't seen a deer yet. And he was fixing to quit. He'd had enough. And I said, that shooting house allowed me to sit there and visit with him and let him chew gum and all that kind of stuff. I said, I was trying to save one of our soldiers from leaving the group. And I talked about the shooting house and the food plot. And by the end of that conversation, he was asking me what the dimensions were on that shooting house so he could build one for his son. So you got to get out of that back in the day mindset. And I talk about back in the day all the time, but I'm not stuck there because they didn't live then. It's not even relevant to them. So it's
you brought up a good point, and I've never heard it presented that way, about going with your granddaughter and recognizing that, the phone and social media, love it, hate it, whatever, it's here to stay. And that's how people communicate. So, I mean, being savvy enough, and we talked a little bit offline about, being computer savvy or whatever, and, the lack thereof, but being savvy enough to recognize, hey, if I want to connect with my kids or my grandkids and be relevant to them and have this lifestyle relevant to them, that's just a concession that you're going to have to make. And you're going to have to go, talking. It does no good to talk about what everybody did back in, the 80s. I mean, it doesn't matter. That's not what translates today. I mean, take the wins where you can get them. And the one thing that me and Mark always talk about, that really resonates with me is, not just the hunt, because the hunt is a 3 or 4 hours, if you're lucky with a kid, 3 or 4 hours is about what you get. But
3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, that's about what you get. I'm talking about from the time you go.
I get about 45 minutes.
Get in the truck, drive up to the property, whatever.
Yeah. I got you. But
really, kind of the whole being around the skin and shed and being around kind of the culture and that is really where the memories kind of get set in. They are for me anyway. I mean, that's one of the things that I set out to do on our property. And I told my wife this was, I want to set up a place where people that I like, that have attributes I like, want to come to and hang out and have my kids around them, so we can cut up and tell hunting stories and whatnot, have my kids around that. That's a big win for me. And that may include, moving that up for social media when they get old enough to be on there and kind of integrating that into it. But really that culture is what I think everybody's longing for. It's not just to go kill a big deer. I mean, that's great, but the culture is what I think you're talking about. We spend a lot of time talking about here, and kind of how to immerse your kids in that. That's a big goal of mine as they get
Absolutely.
older.
Yes. So Cory brings up hunting culture, which we talk a lot about, specifically to the South. Cause what have you seen? Not the hunting industry, just separate the hunting industry if you can. I'm not referring to trends in the industry, but in your hunting career, what are some changes you've seen in the hunting culture? For me, like just as an example, for me, what I've seen, I just turned 40. So I'm realizing I'm no longer young, but I've seen a lot more people get involved and understand habitat and, burning and disking, early successional. I'm one of those people, our food plots when I was a kid were like ryegrass or whatever it was. They were not good food plots. And so now, and that's a change in the hunting culture that I've seen. And that's been heavily related, or I should say a lot of correlations to social media. There's some bad things, but there's people like yourself. There's people like, Dr. Craig Harper has been on Mossy Oak Gamekeepers last week, about to be on this week. There's people like that are extremely knowledgeable, that are now at our fingertips in our pockets. So I've seen that change. And so there's been more people that are more educated. Growing up, I was a kid of, QDMA, growing up late 80s, early 90s. That's been my background. And like, I didn't really grow up watching a whole lot of TV shows just because I didn't really get into them as much, but I was a nerd as far as QDMA. And so those were my role models looking up to, and people like yourself being involved with those groups. But what are some things that you have seen change as far as the hunting mindset in the South?
Well, I go so far back, it's going to be way different than what you guys experienced. Back then it was all all about food. My dad was a kind of a lifelong Army guy. When he got out, or 20-year Army guy, when he got out, he was the sports editor for the local newspaper. He had a column on Sundays called Roving Around Outdoors. And we used to do rabbit hunts and squirrel hunts and all that. And it was mainly about catching a mess of white perch and cooking. It was so much related about the food thing. And it's kind of grown away from that, and it's just what we do in America. You take a Model A and go to the inn, and now you're watching monster trucks in the Astrodome or wherever it is. America just takes stuff and makes it so much bigger and better. and that kind of helped. Yeah, that's what happened to the hunting. What I saw was less and less people doing it because of all of a sudden you needed both people working, and it's like being in what formerly QDMA. One of the most eye-opening things we ever did was the first Field of Fork event we did. And they recruited people through these farmers markets and stuff. And it was a bunch of people showed up, and it was a very diverse crowd. There was you could see there was a girl over there with purple hair and two Asian guys. It was just very diverse, which was fascinating to me. And I would talk to these people and say, what's your interest? It was always number one was food, protein. I want to do this. And what was hanging them up about deer hunting was they had no issue with getting good with a rifle or a crossbow, whatever it was. Where they were stumbling was I wouldn't know what to do with it after it was down. Not so much in turkeys, because you can see yourself throwing a turkey over your shoulder and plucking it. You eat one for that. And so they taught them so much stuff, how to field dress. They didn't know there were deer processors everywhere. So that's what I've seen is like, it's harder. Not back in my day, everybody hunted. Every kid's dad hunted or fished. And now it's like most of them don't, if you get what I'm talking about. So you got to figure out how I'm going to introduce them. That's what I tell people all the time. And I get some crazy looks for this, but if I'm going to pick somebody to really invest some time with, I'm not picking a kid. I'm going to pick his dad. And the reason I'm going to try to get his dad is because he's got a driver's license. And if he loves it, then he can go back again and take his son. You take a 10-year-old and get him just fired up beyond belief. If somebody's not there to follow up, he's kind of dead in the water. And let me tell you this, there's a lot of guys and gals out there your age who look at your truck and look at you wearing your camo, going in, and they want to live that lifestyle. They just don't know how. It's a little intimidating. But think about this. If you took one person in your neighborhood down there who's dying to do that, and just, okay, I'm going to give him 2 weeks or her. I'm going to teach him everything to get him in there. If everybody did that, we double our numbers in one season. Boom. It's all about that time, which is your most precious gift. And when you're working, trying to make a living, being the rock, it's hard to have that kind of time. But that's the battle we're in. Back in the day, there were no battles about hunting. You could go and ask any landowner. There was plenty of public land. There weren't any battles. So that's the kind of change I've seen.
So I'm right there with you. I'm the president of our local branch of NDA, and the hunts that we've done have been really focused on getting adult hunters into it. We have the same philosophy. I mean, we'll take kids. We love doing kid hunts, but really getting adults into it. And a lot of our membership has either never hunted before they came out to a banquet. You just had a big party and then they kind of got into it, or maybe they went once with their dad and they wanted to kind of get back into it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, if you can get dad hooked into it, he'll start going on the weekend. He'll take the kids and watch that. It's a lot of fun. But just taking a kid, and that's great. I'm not discouraging that at all. But understanding the logistics of it after that, a lot of people don't. It's hard for a kid, if they don't have somebody, a mentor.
At the very least, you want to be able to convince them that this is correct. This is what we should do. Because you run into anti-hunting people it's not as bad as it used to be. The NRA, they used to do these things called the Great American Hunters Tour. The first one was up in Philadelphia, and Dick Idle, if that name rings a bell, he was the whitetail guy. Jim Zumbo was the elk guy. I was like the turkey guy, but we did these, and you could see protesters out there, in big bunny suits throwing paint at you and stuff like that. You don't really see that anymore, but it's good to arm yourself with information and not be scared to have the conversation. When somebody looks at you and says, "Do you hunt?" and they're taken aback, you need to be able to have that conversation, if nothing else.
I've never taken an adult. I have never taken an adult hunting, and something we've put some thought into, and have them come away and say, this isn't for me. It was great, but I've never had one say that. Usually, okay, which they're, by the time we get back to the house, they're Googling what gun they need to buy and all the stuff they need to get.
They're overwhelmed.
Give them a chance.
They're overwhelmed with how this fits. Everybody has that instinct. The best interview I ever did was with Gene Winsel. Gene and Barry Winsel, the Winsel brothers. If you ain't never heard of them, Google them. They were my favorite. And Gene Winsel was talking, and I ended up calling the interview "The Death of the BB Gun." It was the craziest, most epic interview ever. But he talks about everybody has that instinct, whether it's hunting, gathering, fishing. He said it's just like drinking water, breathing, everything else. It's in there. These days you got to pull it out of people. And most people that experience for the first time are just blown away with how right that all that feels. So yeah, and that's a responsibility. And can we keep up? Who knows? We live in just weird times right now, but hey, same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, man. You try to reach one person at a time if you can.
That's right. And Cory had mentioned the a skinning shed earlier, and that was one of our, I grew up in a hunting club in low country, South Carolina. And we had a skinning shed there. And that's something that we wanted at our farm. And I think it was maybe, I don't know, 2010 or 11 or so, we finished it, but having a skinning shed on the property to where, and we were doing this for years in the early years of a farm. You shoot a deer, people come help you load up, like if you have guests there, and then someone's driving that deer to a processor, and, round trip, it might take an hour, whatever it is, but there's a big disconnection. And I'm not knocking it because we did it for a while, but when you, really and truly, if anyone's listening, I'd love to have just to do a quick little podcast about how to maybe construct a very inexpensive, good skinning shed, but it doesn't take much. We've got, a concrete floor, we've got a winch set up, and then a walk-in cooler that we built with a refrigeration system. It's not very intricate, but when you go from that rush, like what you're talking about, Cuz and Cory, you've got, whether it's you or your friend or your adult friend or their kid, and they've gone through all those emotions of seeing the deer, killing, pulling the trigger, finding the deer, you load it up, and then what? And, sometimes kids, if you have more than one kid, they will feed off each other, but then bringing that next step of showing them the meat and going through, because they're going to see some stuff, the skinning shed, that it's, you got to ease into it. And I've been doing that with my kids, but all of a sudden I've got some friends, and Cory knows who they are, that they've been, hunting with me, and they didn't grow up hunting. They started out of college, because there's a lot of guys and girls that they, you're in that age of, being in college, 20s, whether you go to college or not. And there's some stuff that you realize that you weren't exposed to as a kid, but you want to be exposed to now because your peers are, they're hunting, and you take them hunting, and showing them that connection of the dead deer, that carcass, that bloody carcass, to that perfectly hung carcass that is, dry, all the blood's drained out, and then it sits there for a couple of days, carving the meat out. That's a pretty awesome connection. And the skinning shed is probably one of my favorite places at our farm, because that's the social hour, and that's the camaraderie, and really, I think when people get hooked on hunting, because even if you don't see a deer, you're going to go back and hear the guy that did, and talk to him there. But that was a big, I think, jump for us as far as inviting guests and just kind of going that next level. And also me as a hunter, because you have a better connection as far as the meat. And when people, every now and then, when someone says, "Oh, I just don't see how you could hunt," and it's like, well, assuming they eat meat, it's like I could hunt, or I could just push my cart down the meat section of the grocery store and just wonder where that meat came from, what's all in it,
Yeah.
as opposed to just, going and getting it yourself.
Yeah, it's
But go ahead, Gus.
I was going to say it's having that argument or bringing it up. We need to have those discussions about it. I was sitting in the airport at Albuquerque. I'll never forget this. I've been out there trying to film an elk hunt for like 7 days. Zero luck. Nobody got a kill. Anyway, I'm at the airport going home. So I'm already a little cranky because we got nothing to show for it. And this lady sits down by me, and I had something Mossy Oak. I don't know what it was. It was either my small duffel bag, or my pants or something. She started a conversation. You been hunting? Yes, ma'am, trying to elk hunt, blah, blah, blah. And she went off 6-7 minutes, just how cruel and inhumane and all that. And I just listened to her, nodding my head. Yes, ma'am. Like she got through, I said, "Hey, I understand. How long have you been vegan?" And she said, "What?" I said, I'm assuming you don't eat meat. Well, sure, I eat meat. I said, so it's okay for him to shoot a steer in the head with a wooden stake out of an air gun so you can go to McDonald's, but you don't want us chasing something out in the wide open, which is really hard. And when I got through, she just looked at me. She said, well, that's different. Well, you can't win that argument. You might as well move on to somebody else. But that gives you a mindset of what we're up against, especially in today's world. Common sense is a superpower. So you need to arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can. So I get it.
That's it. And I mean, I don't want to go on tangent, but it's if people could just realize, I'm not saying everyone needs to convert to eating venison, but if the general public could just realize how sustainable the white-tailed deer is as far as protein, what they do in the landscape and their importance as a species, and then in the sustainability, because they're here everywhere, most part of the country, even way out the South, obviously, it's much more sustainable than some people can, other forms of meat. So what's some goals you have this year? Cause I look at July 4th. I've always looked at like July 4th and the MLB All-Star break. It's like, as soon as I get an MLB All-Star break, I kind of start paying attention more to baseball, start focusing on the fall. And then once we get through the SEC media days, once we hit the SEC media days, I feel like the fall's right around the corner, and I'm starting to get that itch. I've got some cameras out. So what are some of your goals? Do you have some specific goals, whether it's for you or for grandkids this fall?
Yeah. And this is going to sound crazy, but I got goals. First goal is to get Cranky, my youngest one, into a compound bow. He is so done with shooting a crossbow. Oh, he's killed deer with him. He's had fun. He said, Pop, I want. So the number one is to get Cranky into a compound. My number two goal this year is to put out less trail cameras. And I'll tell you why. It's because I'm pretty good at putting them out. I don't have I don't have cell cameras. I have old school, put the SD card in there.
That's me.
That's me. I put them in places where I can ease up there on that little electric golf cart I got a turkey hunt on, and never put my feet on the ground. I can take that card out, put a new one in, spray it down, back out, real low impact. And so I kind of know what's going on out there. And I find the boys saying, what you got on camera down here? Because they're getting to that age now. They didn't kill some deer. They're wanting to kill that big one. So I'm going to put out less cameras and just say, hey, man, there's a big buck rub down there in center field. Or I saw 5 new scrapes down there at the swing set or something like. I want to work on their imagination this year instead of, here's a 9-point. He's 16. I don't want to show them any pictures. I want them to, let's go look and see how big that rub is. And and to try that, and they may even put their own cameras out, but that's my goal, is to get them imagining what's out there instead of seeing what's out there. So, and that may sound corny, but that's what I'm doing this fall. So
that not at all. And in fact, you're talking, I'm thinking about myself. If you look back on my Instagram several years ago, it was like this time of year, it was bucks. It was bucks and velvet. And I would have, I used to have a lot more trail camera photos, and I started to pull back because there was a couple bucks that I didn't kill. And, in hunting bucks in the Southeast, maybe I'm just not quite as good of a hunter as some other people, but I've got a large tract of land, but I don't have all the deer on this track are not my own, and they can be shot anywhere. They can be shot multiple tracks. So I found myself really spending all my hunts going after 1 or 2 particular bucks. And sometimes it happens, and most time it doesn't. So it became not fun. And then we started to grow bigger and better deer, product of habitat improvement, product of QDM, the quality deer management philosophy that NDA goes with. So you're going to have those bucks. And I found myself not shooting does. We weren't shooting enough does. And then it became it just, a lot of it became not fun because you were going after bucks, or you have guests up and friends up and they want to see photos of the bucks and they're waiting for those bucks. And we weren't shooting does. And we went through some seasons. So I just kind of stopped doing all that. And then you get to a point, and I mean, Cory's starting to see that too in my property, where after so long of hunting a land and knowing how the deer move, I don't know I don't have a photo of a couple bucks in the area, but I know they're there. You know, I know that once you're doing that, letting them grow model and shooting does, you know that you're going to have bucks. And if you understand what they're going to be doing, when they're going to be doing it, you can, I mean, like Cory's got a pretty good handle on my farm to kind of go out at certain times and know where they're going to feeding, know where they're bedding, and killing them. And I like that approach, cuz I mean, everyone's different, but I just found myself, I was obsessing too much on cameras and
Yeah.
and the time it takes. I mean, if you have 6 to 10 cameras, and a lot of my cameras are the hard SD cards like yourself, because I've had some struggles with cell coverage. I mean, I'm in South Carolina up against the Savannah River, pretty close to it within 30 minutes, and cell coverage is spotty. So, and if you have 6 to 10 cameras or more than that, you're going to spend the whole entire day, because I'm like you, I'm trying to do it the right way. I'm trying to go in thinking about wind. If the camera's somewhere over here, I don't want my wind blowing whatever way. I'm wearing rubber gloves. It's just time consuming. And you know what? Back off and tell people we're going to shoot some does. If you see a big buck, take them.
Yeah.
And it's just, it kind of takes that pressure off. And it also takes pressure off of guests and kids having to, wait a minute, it's outside the ears, but is that 18 inches or 16 inches, or, the width, just, I've been trying to trend towards shooting off age, which we were talking about offline, but not so much. It needs to be a certain inch on the rack, but age.
Yeah.
If we can try and target 4-year-olds, knowing we might shoot some 3s, and every now and then we're going to shoot a 5 or 6, that's great. But it's so much, I think, more enjoyable as a hunter.
Well, it is. And you look, I got as wrapped up in that as anybody. And it is hard. It ain't like we can't keep up with them guys in Kansas and Iowa. It just ain't gonna happen down here in Mississippi, not for me. I'll get pictures of great deer that are 3 years old and then they disappear. It's like, what happened? I didn't do anything wrong. So I got 2 cameras out right now, and they're both on those iron clay peas to see if the deer are going to eat them and at what stage. And I don't think I'm going to put any more out. I'm going to wait for the buck rubs. I'm going to take the guys down there and show them, look at this rub, look at this grape, just to see. And again, I don't care how you do it or what you do. If you buy a hunting license and you go by the rules, we're on the same team. I don't care how anybody does it. I don't really care about muzzle loader versus this versus cross. I don't care. If you're hunting and you're doing it legal, we're on the same team. It's just, I like to try to think about what can I do to make it more thrilling for these grandkids, because they have, like we said in the beginning, they got a lot to occupy their time, and you just want them involved long enough where they're like, yeah, I think I'm gonna do this whether pop's around or not. That's the long-term goal.
That's right. Cory, you got anything else before we wrap this up?
And I got a whole bunch of stuff. This conversation can go forever, but I know it's no, I mean, really, just it's been great, and I'll be thinking about this one. A lot of stuff I probably should have asked, but or should have said, but no, I mean, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate taking the time.
Hey, it's back when I was doing the PR for Mossy Oak, it was all about outdoor writers, and I knew them all. It wasn't no internet, there wasn't any social media. You had to take these writers and get them to take photos of Mossy Oak. That's how we did it. Well, it ain't like that anymore. And it's people like you guys with these podcasts. It's so important. It's no different than the guy who was the editor of Peterson's Bow Hunting. This podcast will reach more people than that, just like this. So taking the time to do it and having that stick to itness man, it's critical. Thank y'all for taking your time to do it. I'm still doing it. I'm podcasting and posting stuff at my age just because I want to be relevant to my grandkids. I don't really care what anybody thinks. You get my age, you don't have to care what anybody thinks. But it's like I'm gonna be on the social media with good news. You know, it's like you see so much junk out there. They come to my stuff, it's gonna be, you know, a cool photo, some kind of positive message. I'm ready to fight that battle in there with them, and that's what you guys are doing. So, hats off to you for doing it. Very appreciative.
Oh, I didn't mean to say this because I started getting Gamekeeper earlier this year. I was stealing an article. I was reading them off, you know, for free, and then finally I went and bought the subscription. Man, that y'all got something really good going on there. I look forward to getting those magazines. I bought a couple subscriptions for my dad and my father-in-law, but that's probably the best thing going. You know, that's
it's a good
all
message.
around.
Yeah,
that's great.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'll pass that on down to Bobby Cole and Toxie, those guys down there.
Yeah. I mean, Mossy Oak Gamekeepers, like what Cory said, is just it's phenomenal. I mean, if you look at, it's no surprise if someone thinks about it, but it was I'm forgetting what DNR agent biologist was talking about this at the Southeastern Deer Study Group in Baton Rouge this year. But if you take all of the whitetail license sales any given year in the U.S., all the whitetail license sales, it's still not more if you were to combine all the turkey, elk, and any other hunting license. Whitetail is driven. And then furthermore, if you look at hunting license sales, just hunting across the board, it's far more east of the Mississippi than it's west of Mississippi. And I'm saying all that in the point of that presentation at that conference was about how important, and one of the reasons why it's the Southeast Deer Study Group. You know, there's a reason why some of these major universities, Mississippi State, Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, Florida, they're in the South. Texas A&M. I'm forgetting that college name, but it's very important, and I think it's important and great what y'all are doing at Gamekeepers, because of the people down here, and it's. Aldo Leopold's got a great quote about, and I'm not going to try to attempt it, but basically it's like the future of conservation is in the private landowner. And that couldn't be any more important in the Southeast, because of how much there is a lot of public land, but not out like in the West and Midwest, and how important it is for people like Cory and I to learn from people like you. And you talk about, your social media. Well, I think it's phenomenal what you do, because there are a lot of talking heads. There's talking heads in any kind of industry in the world. There's talking heads that just have to fill time. And sometimes I don't realize, like when I see people doing it in the hunting world, I don't think they understand what they're doing. Because that's why I don't really want to do this podcast every week, because I don't, this is not my full-time gig. But I want to have a good content and not just have to come up with stuff to talk about and make it relevant. But someone like yourself, I mean, your content that people need to consume, based on your knowledge and experience and what you know in the woods.
Yeah, it's a positive message. You see a lot of people who have in the hunting world have way more followers than I do. And about 90% of the time, the only time they post is they're trying to sell you something. They may work it in there cleverly.
Yeah.
But I just don't do that. If somebody sends me a product or something, if I'm going to use it, I'm going to say, hey, they sent this to me. Here's what but I don't hardly ever even do any of that. So the social media is a big deal. I look at it like a battle anywhere else. I'm gonna be straight up honest, forthcoming. And here's some good news. Here's a funny thing that Cranky did, or here's something else. So you got to reach them, because if you're not getting it to this, they're not seeing it. You watch all the TV days are just so slow right now. It's like you better be sending it to that phone. or their iPad or whatever it is.
That's right. That's
You
right.
you may be against Twitter and TikTok and all that stuff, but the people that want to corrupt your kids, buddy, they're really good at it. So we
That's
need
right.
we need all the good media out there we can get. So thank you guys for being part
That's a
of
great
that.
point, man.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's a good transition. Cuz I would like to wrap this up with the same 3 questions I asked every guest. First question is if you can recommend, I used to say a book, you know, if you have a book recommendation as far as hunting outdoors, anything in that field, or any kind of media content, a show, a podcast, something. If someone's listening in the Southeast, they're into hunting outdoors, is there a book or media platform that you would recommend?
You know, I've gotten to where I've done this so long and I've been a part of so many things. I don't watch a lot of hunting content anymore. You know, some of the podcasts I listen to are about I don't know, being more self-reliant, that kind of stuff. I don't read much at all. I read Tom Kelly's books. Other than that, an occasional menu, and that's it for me. I'm not a big reading guy. I do have some YouTube stuff I watch, but it's got really nothing to do with hunting. It's more about a lifestyle, acting right when nobody's watching, because that's how kids learn. You can have all of the defining moments you want, but they're going to learn how to act by watching how you roll. And so I don't really have any kind of hunting content. I'm a big fan of what the NDA is doing online. They spent so much time doing that deer hunting 101 stuff, and they just reshot it.
Yeah.
I recommend that to people all the time. So if I had to pick one, it would probably be that, because they did such a good job on bringing people into it. And you just go to the NDA website and the hunting 101 and get that class. It's phenomenal.
I you're spot on. I retook the newly shot Deer Steward 1 course.
Yeah.
And they brought in Dr. Craig Harper and Dr. Marcus Lashley and some others. And it is, I know when we recorded with Ben Westfall, I think last episode, to talk about the Deer Steward 2 course, I'm host. I say hosting. I'm really the venue, the farm for the NDA crew to host it. But that Deer Steward 1 course, even if you don't own land or have access to it, but you maybe, get invited to hunt or hunt public land, that is going to make you a better hunter. And I said that so many times, but it absolutely is, just learning the nuts and bolts. And I will add that earlier in this podcast, I used the word huntability. I've used it before. I don't know who coined it, but the only person I've ever heard use it, or the original person for me at least, was Dr. Craig Harper. So I did not, that's not my word. I'm not taking it from him, but I do like that suggestion. Okay. So number 2 is, second question is, if you can, what's just one of your all-time favorites wild game recipe? It doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be something very simple, but let's say you've been on the road traveling, you've been elk hunting for a week or so and living at a hotel or whatever it is, and you haven't had much wild game. You finally get home and you've got a freezer full of everything: fish, duck, maybe a goose, deer. What's kind of your go-to where you just look forward to?
Yeah, well, I ain't gonna surprise anybody here. Not only me, but my girls, for Christmas, this is our Christmas dinner 99% of the times, is fried tenderloin, cheese grits, baked beans, and homemade bread. That's
There you go.
I ain't gonna say it's my death row meal. It's pretty close. I'll tell you my death row meal later. But to me, here's the deal. Here's what I do different. And Stephen Ranella would probably throw a rock at me if you heard me say this, but I like to take the backstrap, cut it in pieces like I'm gonna fry, smaller pieces, and I soak it in cold ice water. And I'll change that water 5 or 6 or 7 times. I had to do that with the girls because they didn't like the wild game taste. So I'll leave that meat soaking in ice bath for a day or 5 hours or whatever it is. Keep draining the ice off, putting fresh water. And then I tenderize it with a hammer, run it through those things. And then it's a flour and egg batter. But I'm just telling you, it's the most fabulous meal. And you could ask any of my girls or my grandsons right now, what do you want? What do you want to cook out here at the farm? Fried deer meat. It's nothing even close.
Okay, so I've got a lot of questions. So how thin are we talking about?
Yeah, here's the deal. I'm not trying to impress anybody with like smoking a deer tenderloin
Right.
because they say you got to eat that rare, medium rare. I ain't doing that. I think everybody's different. So
Yeah.
when I slice a backstrap, maybe a 1/4 inch, which is pretty thin, about the width of a pencil. Boom, boom, boom. Sometimes I'll cut that in half. I want it to be like the size of a turkey nugget, but flatter.
Gotcha.
That does two things. It enables me to soak it less time in the ice bath, getting that blood out. And the meat's going to turn a little color. It may turn a little gray. It tastes the same. And then dry that off, tenderize a little bit. And then when you put it in your egg and flour, and you fry it, you got to fry it, but like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And it's just crispy and good.
But it is good.
It's phenomenal. It's probably not a healthy dish, not a popular dish, but I can tell you what, it's #1 out there at my farm.
I'm assuming that there's a taste difference, but isn't that what people do? People will do the same method, but with milk or like buttermilk. They'll take a backstrap.
I do mine in mostly egg. I'll do a dozen eggs. And milk's fine. My dad used to soak it in Coca-Cola to get the blood taste out of there. I just do it in an ice bath, keep it cold.
Gotcha.
I do egg and flour. You season your flour first.
Oh yeah.
And salt and pepper and garlic and all that. And then when you run in that egg, the egg sticks better to the meat to me than the milk does. Flour, pop in that 360 to 70 degree frying pan, skillet, deep fry, whatever you got. And man, it's hard to beat. I'm making myself hungry right now. I love it.
That does sound good. And that's part of the reason why I love asking this question is because I've been pleasantly surprised by how many great different answers I get. And when people give the answers, they give it like yourself, like they're enthused and they love it, and you can tell. Yeah. And it's just it's something different because I got caught up years ago. Sometimes you get caught up eating the same thing over. You got your tacos, your hamburgers, or whatever it is, the same type thing. And it's good to hear other. I'm gonna try that. I've got to try. I've done it before, but I've never really perfected it. Frying backstrap. I need to play around with that. All right. Third and final question. The most important, and this is why we're all here. So the reason why I ask these questions is because what I've tried to model Southeast whitetail after is habitat. We've talked about habitat a lot, conservation, because I think conservation gets very overlooked, especially in the South. When when you see conservation, a lot of times in the hunting media, it's like out west, a lot of that kind of stuff. And then venison. Venison was the last question. But as far as conservation, what do you feel like right now, 2023, these current times, what do you feel like in the Southeast is probably one of the more important conservation issues that people it should be on their mindset? Something, it doesn't have to be the most catastrophic, but what's something real in the Southeast? Because I feel like, a lot of times people look at, well, we have robust deer populations in a lot of places, not everywhere, but some places we do. Every species is not the same, but people see these robust deer populations and they feel like everything's fine and dandy, but some places aren't. It doesn't have to be deer, but what do you feel like people should really know about conservation wise in the South?
Yeah, first off, no animal that's legal to hunt has ever been or will ever be on the most endangered species list, because hunters take responsibility. They don't wait for the government to do. They'll figure out. To me right now, it's the turkey thing. And National Wild Turkey Federation's launched, they just got the press release last week, a Southeastern study on populations down in these areas and all that. I think that's awesome. And guess who's funding all that? People that buy a hunting license, people who hunt and fish and trap and all that. They should take such pride in that, because they are the reason we have trapping and relocating and, game and fish departments and all that. The turkeys, they're a little more fragile than white-tailed deer. My youngest grandson, he's like, he said one time, we can kill a deer in the parking lot at the mall, but that turkey hunting comes hard to me. So I'm watching that really close. I'm fascinated with it, very proud of how everybody's stepping up. But in the end, the person who loves it, who covets it, he covets that. And they're going to find out what's wrong with it. And they're going to find out how to fix it. They always have. So, yeah, I kind of keep eye on the turkeys right now. Other than that, I say, as long as it's legal to hunt, it's going to be fine. It always has been. So that's my thoughts on conservation.
That's funny hearing you say that, because I think I was talking to Cory. I was talking to you last week. I was telling someone about, like, we're talking about turkeys. And I said, listen, I love whitetails, if you couldn't tell, but they're one of the ultimate survivors. Like, if you look at the history, how long they've been, and the different predators that have come and gone, that they have survived. But, you can see white-tailed deer can live in I think I said the Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
To you, Cory. Yeah, you'll see them, and they're all over where we are here, but wild turkeys aren't. And I thought about this, and it's not an original thought, but it's almost like the more I learn about wild turkeys, and I interview people like Dr. Marcus Lashley and Dr. Mike Chamberlain, and really kind of get entrenched with it, and then see that play out on my farm. I've had these thoughts that maybe the wild turkey is just, they're not able to adapt as fast, evolve as fast around our development, our land fragmentation and our changes in forestry practices and farming and this and that. Whereas the white-tailed deer, they're living, in South America, Central America, the Keys, all the way up to Canada and everywhere in between. But the wild turkey, they just, like what you said, they're fragile, and they're just not, especially with some of this newer research that, like, Mike Chamberlain's putting out about how the hens aren't really seeking out where they're nesting that far in advance, and they don't visit as much because of the connection to predators. Well, when they're just going to, lay their eggs and nest, you better have some great land or some good habitat for them, because if not, it's highly susceptible. So I feel like I just have this thoughts about turkeys. Just, they're, like what you said, they're very fragile, and it's something that, and sometimes it's hard to talk about, because some people have robust populations of turkeys, and there's other people that are struggling to see them.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject. So, it's like anything you talk about hunting, there's no shortage of opinions.
That's right.
I think trapping or lack of it's got a lot to do with it. That's a whole nother podcast I'd glad to do with you. But yeah, I think the biggest conservation in our part of the world, Southeast, is the wild turkey right now. So
one thing you mentioned, and I've heard Ranella say it on his documentary, The Stars in the Sky, I think it's called, but it had a little brief interchange. But like whatever's gonna happen about it, if something positive is gonna save the wild turkey, or whatever challenge we face, it's gonna be the hunters that do it. You talk about that anecdote you had about the lady in New Mexico airport. If y'all got to talking about elk, I would guarantee you know more about an elk and how they live and the habitat they need and how their life cycle and their biggest threats than she would in a million years. Because we love animal. A hunter, we love animals in a different way than, I don't care who you're talking to. We want to hunt them. We want to, it's counterintuitive, but we want to be able to hunt them for years to come, and so we want to preserve them. We want to protect them. We want to learn about them and know about them. And Mark knows more about white-tailed deer than the biggest anti-hunter in the world, and he's killed a bunch of them, So it people just need to recognize that, and you're right. Hunters should pat themselves on the back, but understand that there's real challenges out there, and it's going to be us. It's going to be down to us to fix it.
That's right.
We can.
I love to close those conversations with people who aren't believers. Say, hey, if you really want to help, buy a hunting license.
Yeah.
If you're not spending any money, you shouldn't even be in the conversation. But that's the way I treat with it.
Yeah, they give it all to Sarah McLachlan and sad puppies on TV. They don't give it to, they give their money to sad puppies on TV.
That's spot on, cuz I just started laughing because I was just thinking my alma mater is Georgia Southern, and we've gone through some coaches. We've got Clay Helton now from USC, and when he said that, it's spot on about if you're not putting money in something, you shouldn't complain. As far as college football, you got the fan base that donates, and they're saying, well, if you're not donating, you shouldn't have a voice as far as complaining about the coaches and whatnot. But it's spot on. I mean, what you're saying. I mean, if you're not out there doing something, people, going by turkeys, a lot of states, if not most states, are going through different regulation changes in turkey populations. And if someone's not out there doing something, just volunteering or whatever it is, helping out, donating, and if you can't donate it, if you're so busy, that's great. I mean, some people that they work, join NWTF, join Turkeys for Tomorrow, be a patron of gamekeepers. Anything like that is good, and it helps keep things going. Well, cuz I greatly appreciate your time, especially July 4th week. Cory and I we're very excited that you accepted the invitation, because it's people like yourself that we look up to. And it's people like yourself that, Cory and I, we might be hunting, but if it wasn't, your involvement in the outdoors, people like yourself, we might not be doing stuff like this. It's people ask me all the time, like, well, what's the goal for this? Like, I don't know, but this is a passion and I enjoy doing it. And I can't speak with Cory, but a lot of the passion comes from seeing that passion play out in other people, So thank you for your time. And where can people find you if they don't already know?
First off, y'all need to raise your bar. I'm not worthy of that. I can promise you. That's very, very humbling. But anyway, Instagram, all my stuff's Cuz Strickland. It's really easy. I have an Instagram and a Facebook. I even went back to Twitter after Elon Musk bought it. And I was like, well, I'm gonna try it over there, because there's a lot of hunters on Twitter, So yeah, Cuz Strickland, and send me a private message. I don't have any kids anymore. I spend a couple hours a night trying to answer people, especially who comment like on Facebook and stuff. That kind of freaks them out, but it gives me, I like to say I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on, because I hear from all kinds of people. But yeah, Cuz Strickland on Instagram or Facebook. And
so if you're talking trash about his food plots, he might call you.
I did that. I did that one time. But
that's
anyway,
awesome. I bet he was. He probably didn't know what to say, did he?
No, it took me about a week to find him. I won't take it credit for that, but anyway, I had a friend that was a cop in 2 towns over. He found out who the guy was, and he was a nice guy, just a little high strung.
Oh, I'm sure he was nice after that cop found him. He probably was real nice. Yeah, I that's awesome. I tell you, whenever someone reaches out to me or sends me something, it's just I tell you, I love it, because this is a passion, and it is, and it's cool. Not that many people are reaching out to me, but when they do, it's pretty cool, especially when it's someone that you don't know, and maybe they heard something or heard a guest like yourself. It's just something pretty cool. So I appreciate it, and I'm gonna be looking forward to. It's your grandson, Cranky.
Yeah, the youngest one.
Now I got to ask, is that a family name, or is that?
No, his brother gave him that. My daughter, who she's sitting right over there, she edits all our podcasts and stuff. When she was pregnant with him, he'd kick. he just kicked all the time. And his brother said, that is one cranky baby. So when he got here, everybody just started calling him Cranky, and he accepts that. His name's Ben, but he was at the NWTF convention signing hats because he's been all over my social media and YouTube.
That's awesome.
And he would sign it Cranky. So pretty cool stuff. Yeah, it's fun to. I'm blessed to be able to see that.
That's awesome. I love it. Cory, got anything else before we wrap up?
No, man. I would just add this. You know, you grew up being in the hunting clubs and whatnot. You know, as a kid growing up in the suburb of Atlanta, you know, those TNN shows. My dad took me hunting every now and then. It wasn't every weekend. It maybe once a year if I was lucky. But those TNN shows and ESPN, that was, you know, that was it for me. That really got me into it. So it did make an impact in a lot of different ways. And, you know, go out in the backyard and sit on the fence line and watch some deer walk down the fence line and up in my treehouse. That was it for me. So
wow,
it did make a big difference. And then kind of just, I can't express to you how much those TNN days and, you know, ESPN and all that stuff back in the day, that was very formative, I guess. So
yeah. Well, you're too kind. I'm glad. You know, Toxie's always been behind the scenes, and he was always, and we were in the same mindset. It's not about him or me. It's about that critter. Hey, the critters and the habitat and all that, and tell stories. There's interesting people out there, and we got that.
Yeah.
And so we weren't building egos. We were building a brand, and you got to get everybody involved. So,
well, it worked. We'll put it that way. You know?
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
Well, thank you, cuz. I appreciate it. I got to tell you, we're about to end this podcast, and I still feel a little uneasy calling you cuz and not Mr. Strickland, but I'm calling you cuz.
Good for you.
I'm calling. Yeah. So
Mr. Cuz, the good compromise.
Mr. Cuz, that's right.
Well, you got to call me back, and we'll do it again. We'll do a turkey edition when deer season's over with or something, and we can talk and talk and talk. I can really go loud on turkeys.
I would appreciate that because you know, it's a compliment in a way. It's a backhanded compliment, but Cory has been saying, and I'll tell you, it's 100% accurate. But would you say I'm more of a turkey conservationist than a turkey hunter?
Turkey conservationist. Yeah, he's a turkey photographer.
I'm not a good turkey. I'm not a good getting them in range and then killing them.
Yeah.
I got you in range, Mark. I got you in range. You're just too busy taking a picture. You know.
Yeah. You heard something. Cory brought me to hunt, and there was 2 birds roosting right above us. But I joke. I nerd out on all the habitat stuff, the burning and whatnot. And I'm not, because I didn't grow up turkey hunting because my father is now a retired CPA, but his busy season was tax season. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of deer hunting, but turkey hunting wasn't a thing until after college for me. Yeah. And but anyways, that's another episode. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Cuz. Thanks, Cory. Thanks for your time, and hope you have a good rest of the summer. And we're going to be looking forward to following you, Cuz, and tapping in those 2 goals this year.
I'll keep you posted on that, and thanks for the invitation. You guys
absolutely.
Keep it rolling.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a good one.
Thanks, Cuz.